This is The Debrief with Tyler Burns.
This is episode 26 of The Debrief, and I am with Kenny Asselin. How are you?
I'm doing good, Tyler. Thanks for having me on the show.
And as always, per our new change with the show, we've got my new co-host, Cody Randall. Cody.
So I actually prefer sidekick rather than co-host.
If that's the case, I'm going to start calling you Robin from now on.
How's everybody doing?
You got to wear the tight leotard outfit too, though.
Oh, nobody wants to see that. Nobody does.
You never know. It could work out some way.
It's true. It is 2025, Cody. Don't be judging.
We want to make sure that we're not making sure we're including everybody that's possible to listen to the show. So we want
to be inclusive. Also, I apologize if I look like I'm sitting on the floor. My office chair broke, so I'm sitting in like a camping quad chair at the moment.
But you do have a nifty new background now, which I really like.
I do.
Can't see it that well, but 15 years of fire department t-shirts put up on the wall behind him.
Yep.
Making progress.
It was free.
So
can't take credit for it. That was my wife's idea.
I mean, good for her. That's awesome. So Kenny, you are a retired West Bend Fire Department captain, correct?
Yes. So I was 9 years with the West Bend Fire Department. I retired January 3rd. It's been, I think, 51 days now that I've been retired, but I'm still actively involved because I have a lot of stuff that I still want to do and take care of. I've done 4 smoke alarm installs in that time. I've done 6 because my national registry for my paramedic is due on March 1st. So I'm still going to be teaching at the tech college. And so it's been a nice transition out because I haven't lost, like some retirees will lose their sense of purpose. I have not yet lost my sense of purpose just because every day has been involving something fire EMS related. Still involved with the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Association. So I've been to a bunch of meetings there. Been involved with Safe Kids, been involved with the PFFW Charitable Foundation. And that's the foundation arm of the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin. So they have given us West Bend some smoke alarms as well. So that's why I'm still involved in the program. I want to make sure that those smoke alarms get distributed appropriately and put in people's houses, and as well as my new job. So I just got appointed as the Director of Training and Development for Fire Suppression Solutions. So that is also one of my sponsors. Yes. So Rick Cohn and I have known each other for 30 some years. So what he needed, because other salespeople, if you don't know the fire service, you don't know the fire triangle, the fire tetrahedron, if you're really not involved in that and you don't have training on it, one of the things that they sell is lithium, a fluid that puts out lithium ion battery fires. It's not UL certified because UL doesn't even have a test for it yet, but we're actually working on a bunch of training for this product that has been proven so far to put out lithium ion battery fires. We were just talking today, and I was going to call Paul Rogers from FDNY because he's on the NFPA 855 committee. And I was going to talk to him about the lithium ion batteries because one of the things, we've had a few battery explosions, and we were talking about how, like, let's say the water gets in there. So you've got the thermal runaway. Now you've got the water in there. And what our hypothesis is, we have to get like someone like Paul's scientist to confirm it, is you throw the water on this superheated metal that's in thermal runaway. Now you've broken up the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And what we're thinking is happening is like a levy of the hydrogen gas. So we're still trying to work on what's actually happening so we can explain it to firefighters and other people that are buying the product. And it's been exciting so far as my transition out of the fire service.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that the days of having to dig out a giant trench and fill it up like a swimming pool might be finally coming to an end here soon.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. So it should be. I'm really looking forward to what comes next, because the bigger thing is, like, let's say pub ed in the fire service was really my strong point, and being able to teach, the basics, whether it's, kindergartners are really exhausting. And then teaching to firefighters is almost as exhausting as teaching kindergartners. And then,
we're all overgrown children for the most part. So I can understand that.
whether it's kindergartners or firefighters, if they're not paying attention, dangle your keys in front of them, and then the AED kicks in and they're paying attention. So yeah,
Tony
so it's
knows
been
that
really
all
exciting
too
and really
well.
a great transition to the next chapter.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I supervise a
Tony
bunch
knows
of
that all
children,
too
so
well
yeah.
because I was going to say it took you so long for the chief to let you finally drive the ladder truck. He just kind of dangled the keys in front of you a little bit.
I'm still actually not approved to drive that truck, just so everyone's aware.
So, Kenny, I mentioned, we're kind of sidebarred here, but you mentioned installing smoke detectors. Is the state paying for that, or is that the Professional Firefighters Association?
It's a little bit of everything. So, like, let's say we have partnered with the Red Cross. So the Red Cross has the Sound the Alarm program, and they have always given me smoke alarms. So I get 3 per household with the Red Cross. Then, so before I was getting more, because the thing was, you really wanted to make sure that you were installing 10-year non-replaceable batteries and making sure you're getting smoke alarms inside each sleeping area, inside the sleeping areas at every level. There's been times where I've installed somewhere between 6 and 10 smoke alarms in a home. So initially I had to go do an assessment, tell the people to go what to buy, and then I would put the Red Cross smoke alarms and their smoke alarms in the house. Then we started getting donations. And then, like, let's say if I'd go and put in smoke alarms, somebody would donate $100 or $200. Then there was other grants. So, like, let's say the State Farm grant was a good one. And I got a number of smoke alarms, but I think I got like 10,000 back in 2017 or 2018. That bought our new Sparky suit. That bought a number of other prevention materials and both battery operated and hardwired smoke alarms. So we were able to replace people's hardwired smoke alarms that were 20 years old or 25 years old. So then as it built up, because we had our local radio show. So the first Tuesday of the month was the Fireman Kenny show on the local radio. We'll talk about that later. And then that started getting a lot of attention. And then little things like, let's say, donations from other industries, like let's say if I go do fire extinguisher training. So like, let's say Alkla, which is a plastics manufacturer on the south side of the city, they give us $1,000 towards smoke alarms. And then it morphed into Piggly Wiggly, a local grocery store. We were the Roundup Charity of the Month last May, $2,300 towards fire prevention activities. Then the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin Charitable Foundation, they wrote the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant. Now, the majority and the focus of those smoke alarms were for Milwaukee. Biggest city in the state, biggest problem as far as people not having smoke alarms. So Milwaukee was the focus. Every other city was kind of secondary, but there was always smoke alarms available in some way, shape, or form. Like this last time, we got 36. And then with Safe Kids. So Safe Kids has also given us smoke alarms. So like, let's say house I just did the other day, they got 3 from the Red Cross, 3 from the PFFW Charitable Foundation, and 4 that came out of that other donations. Plus, they got a carbon monoxide alarm and a combustible gas alarm. We've been pushing the combustible gas alarms. We had a house explosion. So we cover part of the town of Barton to the north of us. And in July of 21, there was a house explosion. Haven't narrowed it down, never got to narrow it down whether it was the line for the dryer or for the water heater, couldn't really tell and never came to a conclusion. But apparently the homeowner had lost his sense of smell due to COVID in 2020. And then he went to start the dryer on that Friday night and boom, the house blew up. So that's when we decided, okay, we're going to get this extra money as well to make sure we can put in the combustible gas alarms. And so really when I go into a house, the people get $300, $400, $500 worth of stuff, depending on what I'm putting in, what kind of deals I'm getting on these smoke alarms, whether it's overstocks on Facebook Marketplace. Prime example would be somebody bought a pallet of stuff from Home Depot, and in that pallet were 47 2-packs of photoelectric Kidda smoke alarms. They sold them to me. I want to say, I can't remember exactly, it was like $450, and it cost me $50 shipping. Remember that, whatever the numbers were, it came out to be like $10 a 2-pack, and those sell for like $40 or $50 a 2-pack. So I saved probably close to $2,000 just doing it that way. So we were able, for the last 3 years, so for 20, and Home Depot. I forgot about Home Depot. Home Depot gave us 250 smoke alarms that were, because again, they were coming up on the date where they couldn't sell them. They were still good, but they gave us 250 smoke alarms, and that's when we kicked it into high gear because I didn't want all of these smoke alarms sitting on the shelf in my office. I wanted to make sure they were in people's homes, keeping people safe. So we stepped it up. So we went from, in 2022, we did 45 smoke alarm installs. In 2023, it went up to 65. And then because my part-time inspector got more hours, my part-time inspector was in my position when I first got hired, and then he retired and we hired him back part-time. And because he was getting more hours, I was able to concentrate on the smoke alarm installs, and we did 133 in 2024. So we have well over 200 some odd homes just in the last 3 years that not only have as many smoke alarms as they need, but they're all 10-year non-replaceable batteries.
Awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Indiana, see, this probably would have been back around 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. But Indiana had done something, I think, in partnership with the American Red Cross or whatever. But just about every department in the entire state, Cody, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think just about every department in the entire state got at least, I don't even remember how many. It was a decent amount of smoke alarms.
It was a case full of them is what we got at my department.
I want to say it was like 100 or something like that, but that number might be wrong. But each department, pretty much across the entire state, got X amount of smoke alarms. And then we were to go out and install them in people's houses, which worked out pretty good because everybody was like, yeah, sure, we love free smoke alarms. And yeah, you're going to install it too, even better. So we would go out and do that. And
yeah, because the other part of it is, like, let's say our city is a fairly wealthy city in a fairly wealthy area. However, there is a large contingent of people over 65 who are on fixed incomes that a smoke alarm, they're barely hanging on to their houses, and they are anything to keep them, anything that's going to be free is going to be good for them because if they're choosing between their medications and their food and smoke alarms, they're going to choose their medications and their food. So having the smoke alarms not only protects them, because they thank me for coming in, and I always thank them because realistically, if there's a fire, one, they're getting out. We don't have to go in and rescue them. Two, it helps reduce the amount of damage. So then if it's just a room and contents fire, so then we only have 12 people on scene for 2 hours instead of 35 people on scene for 8 hours. Three, firefighter cancer is such a huge risk that if we are putting in smoke alarms and we're spending less time in that environment, spending less time in our turnout gear, that actually helps reduce our cancer. So it's really a benefit to the firefighters to make sure to go and do the smoke alarm installs, because how many, we still always want to fight fires, and fires are always going to happen, but I would much rather have gone in and did a room and contents fire because, you're fighting the beast from the inside. And then rather than a bunch of houses that are, where the fire's been going for, 2 hours before anybody notices it, you're outside hitting it hard from the yard for an hour and a half before you can even go in. Then you got to bring the backhoe in and tear the house down anyway. So it's actually in firefighters' best interest to do the smoke alarm installs, because then we are going in and actually fighting the fire in the interior and limiting the damage and then spending less time at sea.
do you see an increase in residential sprinkler systems going in Wisconsin?
Not in Wisconsin, because the problem is in other states, like let's say Arizona, Nevada, where it's required. In Wisconsin, there's actually a statute on the books that says you can't mandate residential sprinklers in a municipality. So that's one of the problems. So I'm a big advocate because that's one of my, or soon to be one of my other gigs, is with the National Fire Sprinkler Association. And I am with the Wisconsin Fire Sprinkler Coalition, and also big advocate for the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. And one of the things we try to do is to make sure that we're promoting home fire sprinklers and sprinklers in general. So like, let's say I just had a conversation with the director from the Department of Safety and Professional Services, because he's on the Wisconsin Fire Sprinkler Coalition as well, and promoting the sprinkler saves, no matter what they are, whether they're residential, whether they're commercial, that just shows value to the sprinklers. And so that with the radio show, and then now with the monthly show, so that even though lately I've been doing it weekly, but monthly I'm with Rick Jensen, the host who was with WIBD and now with WRYU. And one of the things we did was promote 3 sprinkler saves every month. Well, people in the West Bend area were listening to that and became big sprinkler advocates. Well, one of the things that happened is we had an 8-unit apartment building. 6-unit apartment that had a fire. Now the fire started on the outside. And when we did the press release, we carefully crafted it to talk about how there was no sprinkler system in the building. It was not required at the time that it was built. Well, there were so many comments on the West Bend Fire Department Facebook page about people who were regular citizens and people I know in the city who were up in arms about the fact that that building did not have a sprinkler system, which tells me that there are a lot of people who are aware of what sprinkler systems are, and they want them in the buildings that they live and go in and shop in, and they are asking. So we're basically creating a demand from the people for safety and making sure that sprinkler systems are in buildings where they should be in.
100% agree. So let's kind of start off with growing up. Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in a little village called Butler, so it's 0.8 square miles, and it was a great place to grow up. So a very blue collar town. It's right outside of Milwaukee. So we're actually surrounded. 24th Street was where it started, and that is actually the county line between Milwaukee County and Waukesha. And so we're surrounded by, because it's only 0.8 square miles, surrounded by some other up and coming suburbs, because that was in the 70s. So realistically, the suburbs kind of ended just west of like where Brookfield is and everything like that. So Milwaukee, Wauwatosa, Brookfield, and Menominee Falls. And Menominee Falls was pretty rural. Brookfield kind of rural, but had Brookfield Square, big shopping center area. So it was great growing up there because everything was close. There was all sorts of kids within walking distance. The local park was within walking distance, and the fire station was only 2 blocks away. So my neighbors, so Tommy Rue, he's 5 or 6 years older than I am. He and his dad were on the fire department. Down the street was Steve Wolf, and his oldest daughter was my sister's age. And around the corner, so Bobby Tarks, who I grew up with, his dad was the assistant chief for a while. And so pretty much you couldn't hit a 9-iron without hitting somebody who was involved in the fire department, because it was, again, 0.8 square miles. Almost everybody that was on the department lived within the village, and everybody was close. And so it was great growing up. And so we always wanted to kind of be around the firefighters. And we talked about all my friends that were growing up. We decided what we wanted to do. And so when I turned 16, then one of my very best friends, Brad Dahl, he and I decided, because he wanted to be a cop in the worst way. And he did become a cop in Milwaukee for 25. And he didn't want to wait till we were 18. So he got them to start the Explorer program. So when we were 16 years old, they started the Explorer program pretty much for us. And it was Brad Dahl, myself, and Jeff Hoke. And Jeff's dad was on the fire department, and his mom, so this is pre-911, his mom was one of the dispatchers. So what happened was you used to have to, and this was even before you had to dial 10 digits, when you only had to dial 7. And there were 4 of the wives who had dispatch centers set up in their kitchens. And when you dialed the 7-digit number, one of them was always around. They took shifts and whatever. And so Jeff's mom was one of those dispatchers. And then we got on and we started at 16, and we got to go. And it was pretty loose with what we got to do. So like, let's say we could go to scenes, but not mask up and be in a burning building. We trained with them the same way we were actually in, like, let's say, training fires and everything like that. So we got a lot of really good training that probably by the Explorer standards, you probably can't do now. Like, let's say you could be in the burn building, but you couldn't be in a house you're burning down, that sort of thing. And so then at 18, I got on as an official firefighter, probationary firefighter. My senior year in high school, I was going to what was firefighter recruit, because firefighter 1 was just kind of starting about that time, and they sent us to firefighter recruit. So he'll kill me for saying this, but Brad's grades were kind of bad. So his dad kind of pulled him out of the fire department side till he graduated. And so it was Jeff Hoke and another guy and myself that went to Waukesha County Technical College. So I was still in high school. So I'd go to school during the day. Monday nights, I'd be going to fire school, and then graduated. And then the next year got sworn in officially at 19. And I initially, like, let's say I wasn't set on being a full-time firefighter. I was actually going to school for marketing, and which actually helped me later on with my prevention bureau job. So it was going to school for marketing, going to taking the fire classes, because we eventually went back. I think it was 92 when we went back for firefighter 1. So firefighter 1, 2, and 3 successively. Went to EMT school in there. So actually that was fall of 89. So it was after the semester after I graduated high school. I took EMT class, but then I was towards the end, I just wasn't feeling like I knew enough. I successfully passed the class, but again, like, let's say, I think you talked about it, Tyler, on some of your episodes where you kind of doubted yourself in certain instances and you should have just done it. And I think I would have passed the registry, but I was doubting myself so badly and I freaked out so bad that I dropped and I finished the class, but never took the registry. And then I went back in 92, because at this point in time, I was dispatching for Brown Deer PD, Brown Deer Police and Fire. That was pre-consolidation of the North Shore Fire Department. And went back and I breezed through EMT class, but I had better instructors as well. And then come to 96, where I got hired in West Bend. And because I had applied for, I only applied for 3 or 4 departments, but that was at a time when a whole number of retirements were happening. So there was massive openings, plus the Milwaukee area was growing. So there was a ton of additional new positions. My position in West Bend was a new position, and it was great because there was 2 guys ahead of me on the list for both West Bend and Fond du Lac. So Jim Wanzer and Don Salvaggio were on Cedarburg, which is just kind of east of West Bend, and they were ahead of me on both lists. So no matter where they got hired, I was getting hired on the opposite. So they took Fond du Lac, which I was happy about because West Bend's only 30 miles from Butler, where I grew up, and we had residency where I had to live in the city. So the nice part was I moved up here within 5 months of getting hired, but I was still able to go back home and do whatever I needed to do back home. And it was great because I wasn't far from my friends and family, but I was far enough away where I was on my own, where I had to make a name for myself and I had to pull my own weight, and there was nobody that I could lean on to cover me if I made a mistake or anything like that. So I had to do everything that, to make a good career. So, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of mistakes along the way. But I think that even with all those mistakes, that after 29 years, I think I was fairly successful with what I did in my career.
Let's go back to, you were talking about how Butler Dispatch was running. That was Butler, right? Where everybody was taking shifts in their kitchens and stuff. So I guess, how many runs was Butler getting in
only
that
like
time?
300. Yeah, it wasn't even a call a day. But like, let's say for that 0.8 square miles, you'd be hard pressed to come up with any 0.8 square mile area that's really running 300 calls in a day. It's a population.
I mean, that's still impressive.
People. Yeah. And then we did a lot of mutual aid too. So like, let's say Waukesha County was really kind of on the forefront. It was pre-MABUS, but we had the same kind of running cards that the MABUS divisions in Illinois were using. And we ended up running a lot of mutual aid calls. So a lot of times to automatic aid to Menominee Falls. So if there was a call in Menominee Falls Station 2's area for a fire call, we were automatically dispatched with them. And the other way around, Station 2 would come by us with a ladder truck for every one of our fire calls. And it was great that way because we ended up working with a lot of the guys that we went to the schools with. So City of Brookfield was full-time, Menominee Falls, all the rest were pretty much volunteer. So Menominee Falls, I had some full-timers, mostly volunteer, paid on call. Butler was all volunteer. Town of Brookfield was volunteer. Elm Grove was volunteer. New Berlin was volunteer. So we all of us that grew up in the fire service together and running all these calls and going to all the schools, we really kind of became a close-knit group across the board. just because of that mutual aid that we had running and all those extra calls. Well, I wouldn't say they're extra because they are part of what we do, but it was probably 250 calls that were actually in Butler and 50 calls that were mutual aid.
Those that were doing dispatch in Butler, they were strictly dispatching for fire, or were they doing it for police also?
Just for fire. So the Butler police officers were dispatched by the city of Brookfield Police Department, and then just the Butler Fire Department. So that was pre-911. Then once we went to 911, then they had to be dispatched by a larger agency, and that's when they switched to the city of Brookfield Police and Fire Dispatch Center. And I want to say that was 1990, either 89, 90, 91, somewhere in there. So that was the one big switch, was when they decided to abandon that idea because of the 911 system.
Now, was that on a volunteer basis when they were doing that out of their homes, or were they getting any kind of compensation for it?
They got small stipends. So it was because of the love of their community that they did that. And they did get some small stipends, but again, like all four of them, luckily were housewives. And so that was at a time when, whether you had a factory job or you had a trade job, that you made enough money or you could raise the family on one income. They did it because it didn't take that much time. They took turns, they took different shifts. Sundays, they got the day off because we had our Sunday duty at the station. So when you had Sunday duty, you would come in and you could make breakfast. Guys would hang out through the morning, and that was when you did all the rig checks and everything like that. So you pulled one Sunday duty, I think every 7 or 8 months or something like that. And you'd be down there from 7 to 4, and then they were off. So then if there was a call, one of the firefighters that was on Sunday duty would end up doing the dispatching, and then the other firefighter would go on the fire EMS call and wait for other people to come back to go on that call. And then, so they had their Sunday days off. And it was a good system for a small, I want to say small town, but there again, it's just a small village in the middle of a bunch of suburbs. And so it did work out really well. And the women who did that were really, really dedicated. And again, got a small stipend. I don't think they got a lot of appreciation. I don't know if they got all the recognition that they truly deserved, just because, like, let's say there was no newspaper, TV station that was looking to cover that kind of thing. And they really should have got a lot more recognition for their dedication to what they did.
Hey, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to start diving into starting your career off in the fire service, kind of go through that a little bit, and then I want to start touching on some of the other stuff. Let's take a quick break. All right, we're back from the break. Kenny, let's kind of dive into joining the fire department. What was your, what's the word I'm looking for? Academy. What was your academy like?
Or West Bend, when I got hired full-time West Bend. We didn't have, so I went right to shift. So I started on shift on a Friday. Then
Sink or swim.
Yeah, exactly. But all of the training, let's say, because I was hired in January, then that's when everything got started as far as like all of the mandatory trainings, like the bloodborne pathogens and everything like that. So I was able just to roll right in, but every day was a training day. And then we still had a number of paid on calls. So actually there were more paid on calls than there were full time. And they were trained on Tuesday night. And so then that was one of the big things. I was training with the paid on calls on the Tuesday nights that they trained. And then any other time, like let's say they were not able to pay overtime. So like, let's say, because with FLSA, training is not really, there's some instances where training. So there's lots of times where I just came in because I wanted to know more about the city and more about the workings of the fire department. And then on top of it, knowing the streets, because we had a street test. Before I moved up here, one of the things I would do is pick a neighborhood on my way to work and on my way home the next morning. And I would drive through the neighborhood and make sure I mapped out those streets and knew where they were. And then, so back then when I first got hired, so again, not really an academy experience, but a lot of on shift training. And there was a couple other people, because again, there were new positions and retirements that were happening at almost every moment, because let's say from 1996, let's go back to 95 before I got hired. In 1995, they became EMT intermediates, the I-85. Then 96, they had added 3 additional positions. Later that same year in 96, they added 3 more at the end of the year. And then it grew. They added a mechanic. So one of the firefighters that was on shift went off shift and became the newly created mechanics position. So from 96 to 2000, we went from 30 full-time to 40 full-time, and we went from 1 station to 3 stations. So we opened up station 2, which was an old emissions test station that they converted to a fire station. That one opened up in February of 98, and then station 3 opened up in December of 99. So there was a lot of stuff going on in between that. So let me think about this. It was 2 new stations, 10 new positions, making the rest of us IVES. Then in 1998, we had the pilot program for the EMT Intermediate I-99 Enhanced program. So we went through that so I call that Paramedic Light. It's basically the skills and drugs that paramedics use 90% of the time. So it was 265 class hours plus ride time. And that got us to that intermediate 99 enhanced level, which when you do things, and there's some things that are second best that really aren't second best, but I want to say the I-9 program was truly second best. We saved a lot of lives. We got to do cardiac medications. We only had one benzo, 1 opiate, and for pain control. And so we got to do a lot of stuff. We got to do cardioversion, but not pacing, or pacing, but not cardioversion. I can't remember. We only got to do one of them. And then from that 2000, then our chief had retired, and then we got a new chief. And then things were kind of stagnant for a while though, at the year 2000, because now you had a whole lot of new people and no retirements, no old guys. So things were kind of stagnant. They weren't stagnant because we were constantly training and we were really ahead of the game in a lot of instances. And it was really an exciting time to still be there, because we had just opened up those stations, had a lot of new lieutenants, had new battalion chiefs. And it was an exciting time because the city had started to grow at that point again. So between 96 and let's say 2004, and there was that short recession, because of 9/11. So in 2001, when 9/11 hit, then there was just a little bit of a slowdown, but then things picked up. Small recession in 04 and continued to grow till 08. Then in 2008, the big recession hit at the beginning of basically 09. And then things kind of came to a screeching halt as far as growth. And so, but the thing was, we were still doing a lot of great things here. And we had a lot of opportunities, because during that time, I'm trying to think of what year it was that we started the paramedic program. I want to say the first group, we started hiring paramedics in 2003 or 4. And I want to say that first group there were a group of 4 that were basics. I want to say that was 2007. And then the next 2 years, 08 and 09, they started sending through the I-99s. They created an intermediate 99 to paramedic bridge course. So instead of having to go 3 days a week, they only had to go 2 days a week. But because I was completing my bachelor degree, so I got married in 2006. and my wife was working at Cardinal Stritch University. So I was able to go back to finish my bachelor degree for free. All I had to do was pay for books and student fees. Well, unfortunately now, because Cardinal Stritch is now closed, so my wife's a Cardinal Stritch grad as well. So we feel like orphans because our alma mater is no more. When I was able to finish my bachelor degree going part-time over a 4-year period, then I missed the I-99 to paramedic bridge course, but I did not want to miss out on being a paramedic. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I was the last of the first paramedics. So I put myself through paramedic school using vacation, trades, education leave. And so in 2010, I had finished my bachelor's, started paramedic school that fall. I think it's because of Tyler Christofoli, who you interviewed on the show, that I actually got in that class, because I want to say it was Tyler who dropped that class before the class started, and I was waitlisted. So between Tyler Christofoli and then some other girl who decided she wanted to go to nursing school rather than go to paramedic, so then I got in last minute. So I used trades leave, vacation, you name it, whatever I could do to go to class. And then in 2011, finished paramedic school. So I was the last of the first paramedics with the West Bend Fire Department.
If you listen to this episode, in the words of Brian King, I'm pretty sure that's a demerit. Just saying. So kind of going back, you were talking about when you were trying to learn like the geography and everything. Cody and I just had this discussion not that long ago, and I've talked to a few other people about it, but I did a similar thing. So before I worked for doing EMS, I worked in dispatch. I was on the city side, so city and county had combined, and when you got hired in, you went through a quote unquote academy, and then you either went the county route or you went the city route. Either way, you had to know your geography. And at one point, my wife and I were not married yet. We were still dating. And I told her, come on, let's jump in the truck. I need to go practice my geography. And we started driving around, and we drove down to the southeast side of Fort Wayne, which is kind of, Cody, what's a good word for the southeast side of Fort Wayne? It's kind of rough.
Low income. We'll go low income.
Yeah, low income. That's good too. But there's this one particular apartment complex on the southeast side of Fort Wayne, and at the time, it was called Eden Green Apartments. And I thought, man, there's going to be a lot of things going on here. I feel like I need to know these streets. So I pulled in there, and she is freaking out. She's losing her mind. She's like, why are we in this apartment complex? I said, I got to learn my geography. It's okay. I got my gun right here. We're fine. We're safe. Yeah.
Lots
we
of
got
stories about that place.
Yeah, so many stories about it.
No, because
so what's
when
the difference? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Because I used to work for the EMS service here in Fort Wayne, and the knowledge of the streets, and had to take a 100-block test. Like that was a thing when I was going through it. So much so, even when we had MVTs and it would route you to the call, my FTO refused to let me use that, which was probably a good thing. But yeah, it's something that's missing.
Well, because we actually had a street test. So when I started, there was 321 streets. You had to know where they started and where they stopped. So like, let's say it's Fifth Avenue. There's actually like 3 places where that starts and stops, and you had to know where those streets started and stopped. They didn't test you on the 100 block, which I thought would be the more important thing, so you'd know, but that's why I tried to learn the 100 block of where these streets were. And so you'd sit down with your lieutenant. You had to make flashcards, and you would sit down with your lieutenant. You had, back when I started, you had 90 days to learn it was 321 streets, where they started and where they stopped. It's a little different now, just because as the city's grown, you have, I think, 90 days to learn Station 1's area, and 120 days Station 2's area, and 150 days Station 3's. And so it was good, because then because we ran a 3-man ambulance back then too. So you always had somebody in that ambulance that knew where a street was, no matter what. And so that was nice because if you had any doubt whatsoever, just ask the other 2 people in the ambulance and somebody was going to be able to get you.
That's interesting because outside of like a critical care transport or something along those lines, I don't think I've ever heard of an agency running a 3-man ambulance.
Not on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, we were the last ones because now they've gone to a 2-person ambulance. So when we added the 9 positions 2 years ago, and then we've also, West Bend has a SAFER grant. So there are 9 additional positions coming in March of this year. And so then they decided that they were going to go to a 2-person ambulance and have just with the staffing levels. I want to say, I gotta come up with the numbers, but I want to say per shift now, you're going to have at minimum 3 heavy pieces with a minimum of 3 people and 2 staffed 2-person ambulances around the clock. And so, yeah, but we ran 3 just because it was easier to do it that way, just because of there was no point leaving just one person behind. And because the majority, like, let's say it's different now, but let's say out of the calls we were running, the vast majority of the calls were ALS calls. Like, people in this city didn't call unless they were already on their last leg. Because, like, let's say the asthmatics always tried to cure themselves, and they waited until the inhalers weren't working and they were taking their last breaths as we were walking in the door. So that was the vast majority were true emergencies. And with the exception of a few frequent flyers there were days I was working, I was sicker than them. And those were few and far between. And so
Asthmatics and COPD patients, I don't think that's changed. They still wait till they're about dead to call 911.
Yeah, and those calls with the 2-person ambulance, then those calls are automatically getting a heavy piece going with them for true ALS. And so, yeah, so it was great. And the thing about, and I always defend the 3-person ambulance because there's always, especially having a 3 paramedic ambulance, because let's say development of young paramedics. And we had a few that we hired that had little to no experience when we hired them. But so we would run, like, let's say if there was just a 3-person station and it would be, it was a driver, lieutenant, firefighter. So the way it would work is on the ambulance, because we would work the California schedule. So that's the 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 4 off. First day back, the driver drove the ambulance. The lieutenant was the assistant, rode up front, and the firefighter was the attendant and rode in the back. And then every day you'd rotate clockwise 1 position. Well, because of that, so like, let's say the first day, the firefighter was the attendant, lieutenant was the assistant. They could realistically do a good evaluation of that firefighter paramedic skills. And then when you rotate it, so now that firefighter's driving on their second day. So now the lieutenant who's in the back with the driver during transport time can evaluate that firefighter's driving skills. Then on the third day, when the driver, the MPO, motor pump operator, was the paramedic in the back, the firefighter paramedic was the assistant. So then there was another good evaluation of their skills. So there's a lot of young firefighter paramedics that had no experience to speak of that I think were really well developed. I'll use like one that he had almost no experience starting, and I would rank him as probably one of the best paramedics on the West Bend Fire Department just because of everything that he picked up along the way. He had some time, very little time as a critical care paramedic just an interfacility transfer paramedic for one of the privates in Milwaukee, and otherwise was really not running very many ambulance calls that were 911 emergencies before he got hired here. And he really got developed by let's say there was one of the drivers that was on his shift that really took him under his wing. And that driver, great paramedic, taught me a lot of things throughout the years and really took that firefighter under his wing and made him into one of the best paramedics that the West Bend Fire Department has.
On that California schedule, were you working 24-hour days or what was your...
Yeah, 24-hour days. So starting at 7:30 a.m. and then 7:30 a.m. the next morning. So yeah, so if if it wasn't busy, I loved the California before it was really busy because, like let's say you got your full weekend off every month. So whether you had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but when it wasn't terribly busy, those in between days were nice because you weren't dragging. But if you had a busy schedule, there was one day where one cycle, so we worked Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, and that Friday was just hellacious. We ended up running, so you could say only 13 calls, but of those 13 calls, remember, we're 30 miles from Milwaukee. Level 1 Trauma Center and the flagship hospital of our local hospital is down there. So of that 13 calls, we had 2 911 transports to the flagship hospital, 2 interfacility transports to that flagship hospital, and a competing system on the west end. We had an interfacility going from Hartford. So Hartford is about 15 miles from here, picking one up and taking them to Summit, which is about 35 miles away. So that 13 calls, that day where we did 13 calls on that Friday, we were only in the station 4 hours of our 20. And it was a little rough. So then, of course, because when I came home that next morning, my wife asked me, "Are you going to nap?" And I'm like, and I had to remind her, no, we don't nap. If we don't get sleep, third shifters don't nap. Third shifters go to bed. So yes, I am going to bed. I'm not napping. I am going to sleep because I did not get sleep in my 24-hour period. And then that Sunday, I remember being not as crazy busy, but it was still fairly busy. And then Tuesday was busy. So at the end of that cycle on the California is great for a non-busy department. But once it starts getting busy, then that California schedule becomes a little tough on sleeping. And now they've switched to a 4896, but the days are a little more relaxed. They aren't like total work days for each day. But to change for that, Saturdays became a work day. So they seem to like it so far, but the jury's still out. I don't know, because again, when I retired, the biggest thing that I didn't think I would miss the most, I lost my access to I am responding. So now I'm just one of the general public and no idea what's going on in any given day.
That's rough.
I only live.
That's so rough.
I live 5 blocks from Station 1. So anytime I hear sirens, go to I'm responding and see what's going on. Now I can't do that anymore. So I don't know how busy they actually are on any given day. But
I know the struggle because there was a time where I used to have a radio and I am responding, and then when I lost both of those, I was like, man, how am I going to know what's going on now?
Right.
So you mentioned the 4896, and Cody and I, obviously on the last episode, we kind of dove into this a little bit, and man, did I get some crap for that. It's all love because it was mostly from friends, but
I'm not a fan.
So what's that?
Not a fan of the idea.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not a big fan of the idea because I feel like that would take a huge toll on your mental health. Like we sit here and we preach all the time that, sleep is important for mental health. It's important for physical health. It's important for all of these things, right? And when you throw in the mix of doing 48-hour shifts, like take a station out of Chicago, for example. Chicago, depending on where you're at, if you're in Inglewood or something like that, it's not uncommon for them to get 23 calls in a 24-hour period. Then you turn that over into a 4896, and they're not getting any rest. They barely have enough time to relax.
Right. And well, I'm split on the idea. I would not have liked the 4896s because I didn't really work that many 48s in my career. And I think 72s probably worked 4 just because I've done shift work my entire life. So before I was with West Bend, I've been working for Brown Deer Police and Fire, and then consolidation. I went down to the North Shore Fire Department Dispatch and the Tri-Community Dispatch Center. So I've been working shift work my entire life, and it's been difficult because it affects my sleep patterns so bad. But let's say in an industry that it requires 24 coverage, so you have to make some choices about, because let's say when I was dispatching for Brown Deer, dispatching for North Shore, I was part-time. So I kind of rotated shifts a lot. I just filled in where they needed me. And then, of course, working for the ambulance companies in Milwaukee, I didn't work a lot of chores. I was working when they needed me and filled in. But the choice that we have is like, let's say the California or the Chicago or the 4896, we have to provide that coverage 24/7. So now we're making choices. Do we want to beat ourselves up really bad in a 24-hour period over 3 days, over 5 days? I'm sorry, when you work in the California, do you want to work the Chicago? Do you want to get killed over 48 hours, but then have 96 hours to recover? And or the other way around is to work the shift work and end up working, like, let's say, third shift or 10/14s or something like that. No matter what, this is just me in my observation, that no matter what, if we're going to choose public safety as a career, that is one of the sacrifices that has to be made, just because there's no way around it. You're going to be working at night when other people are sleeping. So at some point in time, whether you're working the 24s, whether you're working 10/14s, whether you're working 8-hour overnights, at some point you're gonna get a screwed up sleep schedule, and it's gonna take its toll. And that's why firefighters get to retire early, is because at the end of the day, firefighters live 10 years on average less than the average working person. And the endorphin levels and the cortisol levels, they all have their effects. But again, like, let's say, and I'll use, like, let's say so 1/4 of the time that I spent on the West Bend Fire Department was spent working Monday through Friday. So I was running the Fire Prevention Bureau for 7.5 years out of my 29 years. I wouldn't trade away the sleep problems because of all the opportunities that I got for the fire service and all of the things I got to do in my personal. I had a blast having, like, let's say, having a 4-dayer. One of the things we used to get to do. So back before the realignment of the NFL, when the Packers were still in the NFC Central Division, a friend of mine, so he's chief over in North Shore, Robert Whitaker, he had a friend of his from high school that had moved down to Tampa. Every year we would go down, between vacation trades or the 4-dayer, we had the opportunity to get tickets and go see the Packers play in Tampa. And that's not something so if somebody works Monday through Friday could do that, but we had that opportunity to be able to make those trades and make those changes and have the 4 days off or the 6 days off or 13 days off in a row to be able to go do those kind of things. So it's a matter of the trade-off. Again, let's say in our mental health, it's going to affect our mental health, but let's face it, firefighters have mental health issues getting into this profession anyway, because of what
Absolutely.
we are and what we do, type A personalities. So yeah, I would not have liked the 4896. I'm not sure if I was on shift, if I would have stayed. I would have tried it for a little while, but I don't know if I would have liked it. But there again, that's the trade-off that we do make, and we have to be aware of. And that's the best part about, like, shows like yours, is when we're talking about this, my biggest problem with when first responders have mental health issues is the people who don't understand what we do. And they say, well, you know what you signed up for. And well, no, we really didn't. We didn't know what exactly we were signing up for. We saw TV.
No, unless you do it.
What's that?
You can't know unless you do it. There's no way. Like, TV doesn't do an accurate depiction of it. I mean, you could talk to people all day long. We could sit here, we could share like 100 different stories with people. But at the end of the day, until you've been through that yourself, you have no idea what you're getting into.
Right. And so the thing is, like, let's say those people who say, well, you know what you signed up for. Well, we really didn't, because you don't really know. Like, even if you knew some of the stuff, you would have no idea how, like, let's say, and I talked about the cortisol levels. We wouldn't have known that back in the 1900s, back in 1996 when I was first getting on. We didn't know any of that stuff. And now you talk, cortisol levels is a regular thing when you're talking about weight gain and when you're talking about stress levels and hormonal increases. And there was no way to really know that. But like, let's say, making sure that future firefighters, future paramedics, future police officers have a greater understanding of what they're actually getting into and how to cope. because it's gonna affect your health. There's no way around it, just because shift work, it goes against your circadian rhythms, and the circadian rhythms are real. It's a real thing in your body, and you have no idea how it affects the way that you live your life and all the other things that go with it. So again, like, I'm glad I was able to work the 24-hour shifts, and yeah, you miss a lot of things, like, let's say, holidays or Packer games or anything else, but there were so many more opportunities that, like, let's say we talked about the cortisol levels. Now you got the endorphins kicking in for all the good things that we got to do. And then the days that we were working, lives we got to save, properties we got to save. And it's a good thing that we are able to discuss all of the potential negatives to what could happen and turn them into positives, whether it's through exercise or diet or making sure you're getting enough rest on those in-between days.
Yeah, 100% agree. Cody, what you got?
Well said. I'm a fan of the 24/72 concept myself, but most departments and most agencies don't have the financial resources to add a fourth shift, which would be required for that. No, I do 24/48s right now, and I mean, I don't know if I'm okay with them. I wouldn't say I like them. It's still better than the rotation I worked in EMS, which was it was a 2-2-3 schedule where on 12, off 12, on 3, off 12, on 12, and then you had a whole weekend off. Still better than that.
Unless you were unlucky enough to have the 14-hour truck, and then you were doing, now granted, that was only, what was it, 3 days a week? Still sucked.
Well,
yeah, but I didn't like how that was set up. Do 3 14-hour shifts in a row.
And then talking about shift work too, because, like, let's say, depending on if you have a rotating shift of some sort, there's been studies, and I remember the studies back when I was dispatching, and because I went to a course and we were talking about it, and rotating forward is better for your rhythm. So, like, let's say working days 8 to 4, then working evenings 4 to midnight, then working lates midnight to 8 works better for your body than going backwards, because that was one of the problems way back in the day. So when the air traffic controllers got fired, I want to say this is where it stemmed from, because when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers, they were sometimes sleeping on the job, because what they were doing was rotating backwards. So they would be working days, then they'd work a bunch of midnight to 8s, then have to work 4 to 12s. Going backwards is way worse for your circadian rhythms than it would be going forwards. So there were a lot of instances where people were caught sleeping on the job, but it wasn't their fault. They were just not getting the rest, and the way the schedule was working out was so essentially management was setting up something to fail, and it failed spectacularly, but the employees were getting the brunt of the discipline and the brunt of the media outrage from what was going on.
Yeah, for the majority of my career, I worked night shift. There was a little stint where I stepped away from Fort Wayne, and I worked in a small little town called Logansport, Indiana, and we did 24-hour shifts. But I want to say, I don't even remember the rotation. I think it was 24/72, but I can't quite remember. But I could tell you, when I finally stepped away from public safety, technically fully in 2022, thanks, Cody. I want to say at that point, it took me close to a year to finally get used to being on day shift. Like, my body had to do a complete reset and get back to being used to sleeping normal time.
Yeah. Well, I never really got used to it, because, like, let's say when I went from shift work to get the bureau job, and I still remember the day I came home and told my wife, hey, I got the bureau job Monday through Friday. And the look on her face was, I should be home every night, because firefighter spouses, they enjoy having their bed to themselves fully 10 nights a month. So in exchange, we bought a king size bed, and then we had the pillows between us, so we couldn't touch the other one's side. But she's an early bedtime person, and I'm a night owl. So let's say when I was on shift and I was involved with burn camp or we were doing stuff for the golf outing. So the West Bend Professional Firefighters Charities golf outing. People would always ask me, why am I getting emails from you at 2:30 in the morning? I'm like, because that's when I do my best work. So like, let's say I might have a nice nap in the evening hours, and then I'm back to working, setting up stuff for burn camp, or when I was there yet, or the golf outing, or any of the number of things I was doing. But I like, let's say, no matter what, the rest of my life, my sleep patterns are going to be messed up. It's not going to be normal. And I'll always have the interrupted sleep, the sometimes oversleeping. And, it's just one of those things that I have to work around and deal with. But again, the problems I have today, I wouldn't trade away just because of the personal and professional accomplishments and all the people I got to meet along the way. Again, it's a sacrifice that every firefighter makes, and every paramedic makes, and every police officer makes, every dispatcher makes. But again, knowing that you accomplish something more than, I hate to say like the average worker, but you've accomplished more than just the average worker. And those problems are a badge to wear with what from the accomplishments that you've done. And I don't know, maybe now that I'm retired and I'm starting my new position part-time, then maybe that'll kind of, so again, it's only been, well, it's been 7, almost 8 years since I've been on shift. And it's been only not even 2 months since I've retired. So it might end up being a little more relaxing, and, I don't know. But again, those problems, I try to turn into a positive from what I have accomplished and what I've got to do along the way.
Have you found it difficult since going into retirement? Have you found it difficult to flip that switch off?
Well, the thing is, because I'm still heavily involved in so many things, so I haven't really switched it off yet. Well, because like, let's say, if are you talking about like, let's say, running calls and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so let me kind of rephrase that. Have you found it difficult to turn that switch off of going on emergency calls in particular?
No, just because, like, let's say it was a nice transition, like, let's say going from the shift work to the bureau. Back in the early days of the bureau, then if we came up short-staffed, so the training officer and I, we were staff captains, and then we would cover during the day. So we were trying to do our work plus trying to run calls. And so it became very difficult. Like, let's say if I had flammable liquid tank inspection or final on a sprinkler system, then I'd have to not only mitigate the call and then try to call the person when the call was done, saying, hey, I'm going to be a little bit late, or have somebody call for me. So early on, so this was 2017 through like 2020, and especially COVID, because everybody was calling in sick. So I was covering a lot more because it seemed like everybody was getting COVID. And then after COVID kind of ended, so 21 and 22, I wasn't really running that many calls. And then in 2022, the last 2 years of my career, I didn't hit any calls just because we added those 9 positions and we had a number of other staffing changes. So it was a nice transition out because I wasn't running any calls. And again, that might be when we talk about the issues that people have, I didn't even really want to run calls anymore because at that point, not counting the Explorer time, running calls between a volunteer department, the private ambulances, getting hired full-time and running calls. I'd been running calls for 34 years at that point. Like, let's say, additional calls, because I was almost always in the top 5 for people who ran calls because of, let's say, regular shifts, and I didn't call in sick that much. Then overtime, because like, let's say overtime it starts out based on seniority, then it's based on hours. So then people can decline overtime. And then I would always ended up near the bottom of the list because I would always have a good majority of overtime because I would just take it because if I was available, I would just take the overtime. So that counted for more calls. And then callbacks. So if there was multiple units out, they had groups, and then they would page back off-duty groups. And I probably 1 out of every 5 times I came back, I was catching a run. So I was always in the top 5 for calls on the department. And then, so when it got to be 2022, 34 years in, I was just kind of ready to not run calls anymore. So then, I just didn't catch any runs the last 2 years of my career. And especially because I had hernia surgery and I was having some complications from that. So I wasn't even cleared to go. And then as I was getting better and I took fall down a flight of stairs in my last 2 months and messed up my shoulder. So I definitely wasn't going on calls then. So it's been a nice transition that way where I don't really miss running the calls. Some people do, but because of the amount of runs that we had and the amount of, because again, like let's say on any given day, my number might not be higher than like, let's say a big city department, but my hours in the ambulance were going to be higher because of transporting to the hospitals in Milwaukee or outside the area.
Well, Kenny, I think we're going to start wrapping up. But before we do, let's kind of talk about your podcast. You've got the Jeez, I can't talk.
The Fireman Kenny
Show.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So, yeah, because that actually started. So I talked briefly about WIBD. So the local radio station that was here in town, the first Tuesday of the month was the Fireman Kenny Show. And so the host is Rick Jensen. So we got together once a month, and the format was introduction, because I could use, because it was a radio show, I could say KMG 365 from emergency. So my opening tagline was KMG 365, Fireman Kenny's on the air, helping you to stay safe in a world where danger never takes a vacation. And Rick would introduce me with the emergency theme. And then, so there was monthly shout outs for people that helped to the fire department or the Fire Inspectors Association or something like that. Went to 3 sprinkler saves because, again, that was the most important thing, was making sure to gain acceptance and promotion of fire sprinklers. Then went into the whatever like local theme for awareness campaigns. So like, let's say May, I could talk about a home fire sprinkler week or arson awareness week or something like that. In October, I would talk about fire prevention week or something seasonal. Like let's say during the summer months, talk about safety with fire pits or anything like that. And then announce the upcoming campaigns, days, weeks, and months for awareness campaigns, and then sign off. Well, last year, so January of 24, WIBD, Magnum Media switched WIBD to WRYU. We rock you, all 70s, 80s, and 90s rock, trying to compete with one of the local Milwaukee stations. So then Rick Jensen still, and I thank him so much for wanting to still be involved. And we moved the show to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then because Rick had occasionally, like, let's say if there was stuff I didn't have time to talk about. So like, let's say there was for May, Trauma Awareness Month. So we had the trauma coordinator from Frederick Hospital come on, or like, I think it's November, it's Diabetes Month. And we had a diabetic educator from Frederick come on. And so then I'm like, well, I'm going to do the same thing. So now I get a chance to be on once a week now that I've retired. So I can take on those awareness campaigns. So like the one that just went on today, because we missed International Snowmobile Safety Week, which is in January. It was actually a week earlier than what it normally was. And we missed the week for scheduling, but the DNR, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, still wanted to get together and talk about snowmobile, ATV, and ice safety for the late winter, early spring. So that one aired today, previous week, because was Grain Bin Awareness Week. So I got together with a chief and deputy chief from a neighboring department who teach on grain bin safety and grain bin entrapment training. And so any kind of, even little things, anything related to community risk reduction. So I actually have a National Consumer Protection Week is the first week in March. And so I'm actually getting together with somebody from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, because let's say consumer safety is a community risk reduction awareness issue. So if you have bad products that are causing injury, causing death, causing property damage, that falls in our category, whether it's, because I call it FIDIC, so community risk reduction, I call it FIDIC, fire, injury, disease, illness, and crime prevention. And that's all
kind of a catch-all.
What's that?
Kind of a catch-all.
Yeah,
basically.
it's pretty much everything we're going to deal with in public safety. And people ask me all the time because they're like, hey, Fireman Kenny, why are you dealing with crime prevention? And I say, well, like, let's say one of the instances, a stolen vehicle. And then, of course, someone's going to drive it like they stole it. And of course, they're going to crash it. Well, if they crash that vehicle and there's injuries, not only is it a community risk for police officers and the tow truck drivers, but it's a risk for our firefighters and our paramedics as well. So if we're out there kind of promoting crime prevention, then it will prevent any of those things from happening. Like let's say making sure your vehicles are locked. That's going to locks only keep the honest people honest, but in most instances, nobody's going to steal that car, which is going to prevent an accident and then prevent our firefighters and our paramedics from being at risk.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah, I don't know. Tyler, I had sent you. I don't know if you want to play some of those when we do the edit, because I sent you those campaigns. So we got together with the Milwaukee radio group. So there's 5 stations in Milwaukee, and they wanted to do some public service announcements. So we actually got together and we kind of rotated through. And like, let's say again, the campaign awareness. So we had sponsors. So for $800, and on each of the 5 stations, there'd be 10 plays a week. So it depends on when, like there were times that I did hear it, like Bob and Brian on 1029 The Hog. That's the most popular in Milwaukee of all the stations. And I actually heard one of the commercials right about the time as they were ending their show at 10 o'clock. So we did get some good exposure with that one. But for $800, 10 plays a week on each of the 5 stations. So for the 50 plays, it comes out to $16 per play. And the sponsor gets mentioned at the beginning of the ad and at the end. And then somebody local, one of the Milwaukee area firefighters, paramedics, police officers was talking about a campaign. So like mine was Water Safety Month. And that was one of the first ones we didn't have a sponsor for, but they still played it 10 times on each station throughout the week. And then another one. So Ken Jankowski from North Shore Fire Department did one on flammable liquid safety. And we had, I think that was Horwath Family Builders. I can't remember, or was Sherwin Industries. And that got played. And that was actually playing for, I think, a month, where people got to listen to all of the flammable liquid safety tips. Like let's say not adding lighter fluid to your burning grill, not using gasoline to start a bonfire, anything like that. So it was a great campaign. I think throughout my entire career, I've been very lucky with the amount of support that we've had for community risk reduction in the Milwaukee metro area. Because, like, let's say fire prevention has always been the redheaded stepchild of the fire service. And I remember a time when fire prevention didn't get invited to Christmas dinner. Now that fire prevention gets invited to the Christmas dinner, but they're sitting at the little kids table with the community service officers and the over the dog catchers. So at the head of the table is the rescue guy, the guy from Rescue One. He gets to lead prayer and cut the turkey. On his left is the truck guys, because they're almost as good as the rescue guys doing rescue. On his right is the engine guys, because the hose monkeys gotta put out all the fires. And then the dispatchers get to sit at that table, because they respect the dispatchers. The police officers are sitting there as well. But yeah, the fire prevention and the hazmat geeks are sitting at the kids' table waiting to hear all the stories that as everyone's laughing at the big kids' table at Christmas dinner.
Let me see if I can play this here real quick. See if this is a new software. Oh, here we go. Let's try it.
But is it playing for you, Tyler, or no?
Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it on my end.
Yeah, but you just put it in the edit, and then that way people can hear, because that's the big thing too, is like making sure that people understand how to get outreach. And there are all sorts of media outlets. Prime example would be the Home Fire Sprinkler Week campaign. There's stipends available, $750 stipends available to promote home fire sprinklers. And last year we did with Magnum Media, so the same station that I had the radio show on, and Regan Roll from the North Shore Fire Department, she did a kind of an introduction in the same format as those Milwaukee Radio Group ones. I talked about home fire sprinklers. That $750 got us, they were each 1 minute. that $750 got us, I don't remember how many plays. I think it was like 100 plays on like 8 different stations during that week. And there's so many opportunities to promote everything that we do in the fire service with those radio ads and doing anything with the media and everything like that, because it's really very necessary to get the word out, not only about prevention, but everything we do.
I just figured it out. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Working together with first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin, you can help keep our communities safe. They answer the call to be there for you whenever needed. 96.5 WKLH proudly salutes our first responders. Here's another important message from West Bend Fire Department Captain Kenny Asselin on Milwaukee's Hometown Rock.
Everybody is excited to enjoy another Wisconsin summer by swimming in lakes, rivers, and pools. Sadly, over 3,000 drownings occur each year. In fact, drowning is the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 4. Always be sure to supervise kids when they are in or around the water. Install fences around home pools. Always wear a life jacket when in a boat. And avoid alcohol when swimming or boating. Please, always make water safety your highest priority to reduce drownings and have a safe summer.
96.5 WKLH proudly salutes our first responders. Get more information and links to first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin online now at WKLH.com.
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
a great campaign, and they fully supported it. And we rotated people through a little more than they were ready for, because they were thinking like one a month or one every 2 months. And I kind of wanted to make sure a lot of voices were heard. Then we did that for about 2 years, and then now they're just working with the Milwaukee Fire Department, and they've got, I think, 6 different ones that they kind of rotate through that they're going to use for the whole year. But the nice part is it's getting the word out there that, helping with the community risk reduction and helping reduce deaths, reduce injuries, and making sure that people are aware that it's your local firefighters, your local paramedics, your local police officers who are involved in these campaigns. They're putting a name to the message. And I think it's done a little bit of good, because I know people have heard the campaign. And I don't know for sure as far as like any of the statistics, but anecdotally, people are listening to it and at least hearing and heeding the warnings.
Very well said. Well, Kenny, I think that's about all we got. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah. So just like the biggest thing is at the end of a career, make sure you never forget where you came from, because like, let's say I thanked so many people, and I was lucky because at my retirement party, almost everybody, every group that I've had some involvement with somebody was there. So like, let's say my time on the Butler Fire Department, it's been 1996 till now. And I had people from the Butler Fire Department show up to my retirement, and I thank them all for everything they taught me along the way. The chief from Brown Deer PD was there, and I thanked him because I was a little immature when I was younger. And I said, "Hey, thanks for putting up with me, and thanks for getting, helping get me where I'm at." He looks at me and he goes, "You had potential." So that was a good thing. Everything, every group along the way, half my paramedic class was there, and some of my instructors were there. People that were, in almost every facet of everything I've done professionally and personally. So, and like, let's say when I put my montage together of my pictures, so there were pictures, Butler pictures and West Bend pictures that went on the West Bend Fire Department Facebook page. And I got so many compliments from people saying, "Hey, that was nice of you to include your volunteer time. A lot of guys might not have done that." And I said, there are so many of those people. Again, I was 16 when I got on the Butler Volunteer Fire Department. I was there till I was 25, and I grew up a lot. And it was really a great thing that there were so many people along the way. My closing argument, make sure not to forget the people along the way, because again, not just what we've done professionally, but all of the things, like, let's say, and the show concentrates on the mental health issues. And I want to say, because of the support systems I've had, along the way for all those calls that went wrong, all the calls that were just absolutely unbearable to look at. But I had a pretty strong support system. So like, let's say early in the day, CISD, so critical incident stress debriefing, 1890 did the first one, taught me it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to get it off your chest. And so many of my friends that are in public safety, they were there. Now, granted, a lot of times we were doing that over Pabst Blue Ribbons. And so sometimes it was a little skewed.
Wrong with that.
But anytime something went bad, those people are there for you, and always, make sure to lean on them. It's okay. And they will be there to help you, but just don't ever forget them along the way, because everybody who gets through this career has a support system in some stretch of the imagination along the way. So never, ever forget who got you to where you are.
Well said.
Well said. Cody, you got any closing remarks you want to make?
No, I mean, just, looking at the stuff that you gave us and just listening to you talk, you've had a very, very illustrious career, we'll say. And having that support system, like you said, it's big.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, there's so many things, because again, like, let's say we didn't get to the stuff that I had listed, like all of the bad calls, and we all get them. And it's, again, I go back to that. The critical incident stress debriefing was brand new for my first one in 1990, when I was 19 years old. And there were so many things that if other people, and again, like, let's say maybe it's just where I am and geographically, and how close we are with all the people along the way. Unfortunately, there's people we've lost along the way that didn't, for whatever reason, may not have felt like they had that support system. So like, let's say a number of suicides, one person that I worked with here at West Bend, one person that was a retired Milwaukee firefighter who I spent time with at burn camp, or my campers. So I had two campers two that I can think of right off the top of my head. One great kid. He was one of my direct campers. Got him back here for his last year of camp because he had moved away, and he committed suicide at 19. And it's just, there's so many people that if you could reach out, make sure to reach out to those people. They will be there.
Absolutely.
Well, Kenny, I greatly appreciate you joining us tonight. Yeah, congrats on your retirement. And even though it doesn't really sound like you're 100% retired, because now I feel like you're doing more things than you were even as a full-time firefighter, but congrats.
Yeah, I don't
You
know
know
how
what, most of
really-
the retirees that I know do more now than what they did before they retired. And the common thing that it gets said is, well, I do it now because I want to, not because I have to.
Well, and the thing is, we're in this job, we are lucky. And Wisconsin, probably more than others, just because of the Wisconsin retirement system is so solid that, like, let's say there's still so much yet to do. We can retire early, but I have so much to offer yet. Like, let's say, again, mentoring the young firefighter. I was just in Las Vegas. So Ted Stribling, who retired from Milwaukee Fire Department like 12 years ago, he moved down to Las Vegas, and he was, in the last few years, just missing the fire service something fierce. So he got hooked up with the Las Vegas Valley Firefighter Retirees. It's a 501c nonprofit, and they mentor young kids or anybody. Actually, there was a business owner who was like in his 30s who now got into this program and then got hired in the fire service full time. And they were like, hey, can you come down and teach about community risk reduction? He goes, there's no money in it for you because we don't have any money. So you have to fly yourself down. And I'm like, I'm in for this thing because I want to make sure that these kids succeed. They've got a 91% success rate in getting kids hired and getting through probation. And so I taught on community risk reduction. So what it is, why as a young firefighter you should embrace it, and what you can do as a firefighter. So like, let's say everything from writing good reports to being involved in the school visits and everything like that. And so it's one of those things where I feel like I can still contribute And I want to make sure that the next generation has it better than I had it. And they have more opportunities to do stuff like, let's say I had to take vacation to go to the National Fire Academy. I took the chemistry for emergency response class there. I'm hoping that somebody gets to go on duty. The shirt I'm wearing now, Security Emergency Response Training Center, the Highway Emergency Response Specialist class. I had to take vacation to go there. Hopefully we can get stuff working that they can go on duty to those classes and just improve their careers and make everything better about the fire service going forward.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you all. Thanks for checking out the debrief. Kenny, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.